In this series of videos, we're using the openFrameworks C++ Creator Coding Toolkit, an XBox Kinect sensor, and we're going to build ourselves a 3D photo booth. Welcome back to another video in the Coding for Artists Toolkit series. We're looking at the XBox Kinect sensor. In previous videos, we've looked at how we can grab data from them, how we can turn that data into point clouds, and how we can start using thresholding to cut out the data that we're interested in a certain volume of space. Today we're going to look back at the code and we're going to make it a little bit more flexible by adding a GUI so that we can start to debug the projects that we might want to make. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take the code that we've been working on previously, and using my project generator, and on Linux and Windows this is going to be slightly different, but I'm going to add an additional add-on into my code for the GUI. So in OS 10 I'm going to go and find my project, and I'm going to update it using the project generator to include the OFX GUI. You can add this into the add-on file in your project. So launching the project again, I can see that in the add-ons file I have OFX GUI and OFX Kinect add-ons connected, and in my header I'm just going to say include OF GUI, and now it has all the abilities and linking for that library. And I'm going to make a panel using OFX panel and call it GUI. So now I can add GUI elements. In this case I'm going to use a couple of sliders into my panel. So it's declared in my header. So I've set my panel GUI up, and I want to set some OF parameters that I'm going to pass into my panel that can then go and be used throughout my program. So I'm actually going to change nearClip and farClip from being integers here into integer parameters that the GUI can control. So starting fresh, I'm going to say OF parameter, and I want to make parameter of type integer, and by using the same name, whatever code is referring to this variable will still pick it up, but it means that because I've made it into an integer parameter, the GUI can get involved and change it from the GUI object. And then I'm going to make an OF parameter of integer and call it farClip. So these are commented out, but they're made to exist again as integer parameters that we can add into our GUI. So I'm going to come and say GUI in my setup, add, and I want to set up my first parameter, which was nearClip, and then I want to set this, and I can give it a name that it's going to appear as on the panel, and I'm going to set that to be nearClip, and then I give it an initial value that it'll appear as. So we'll use the values that we were declaring up here, 500, and then I tell it the minimum value and the maximum value that that slider or that parameter can be. So I'm going to set the minimum to be 100 and the maximum to be 2000. And then I'm going to add in my farClip parameter as a slider, so I say GUI.add farClip, and then I set it give it a name, which will appear as on the slider, and then I tell it the initial value, which I'm going to copy from here to be 800, and then I tell it the minimum and the maximum, so I'll set that to be 8,008 meters, and these two values I now don't need. So I've included a GUI, I've made one, I've made two parameters as integer values, and I've added them to my GUI, and I'm just going to give this a name, so I'm going to say GUI.setup, and can add a name in here, and I'm ready. And if I tell the GUI to draw, I'll see the controls on screen. So in my draw routine, the last thing that I want to do is say GUI.draw. So now these two parameters, near clip and far clip, are not being set hardwired in my setup. They're being initially set here as 500 and 800 as they were before, but they're variable and will be controlled as parameters by the GUI. And now where they appear in my code, and I was using them as near clip and far clip to clip out a region of space that I want to get data from the Kinect sensor from, I can use them there. So let's run this and see what we've got. So there we have our GUI panel on screen. We can see it's got our name, it's got our parameter near clip, which is set at 500, and far clip, and you can see the sliders show our range of values, which is really, really useful. And if I press the P key for our point cloud, you can see I have my point cloud, and as I set the far clip to be much wider, I'm getting my background appearing back in, and then I can clip that out right down to clip me out, and we'll just have a tiny piece of my hand in there. And I can set the near clipping routine to actually clip out. Here I'm clipping a meter away from the Kinect sensor and closer and further away, so I can use the far clip and the near clip to set tiny amounts of space. And you can see, having set the near clip and the far clip, I've got a distance of about 20 centimeters where the data for my hand is appearing that I can detect if I want to. So that's really simply an introduction to including the openFrameworks GUI, building a panel, using the OF parameter setup to turn something that was initially a fixed variable into a parameter that still runs as an integer variable all the way through our code, but is picked up by the openFrameworks GUI as a parameter that we can change with the slider. Now, one thing that we can also do, in exactly the same as we've made a Boolean with our point cloud here, it might be that we want to set up our debug with our sliders and then make them disappear, which means I'd have to come and comment it out and make it appear and make it disappear in my code. And I can use this same trick again of using a Boolean as a switch. So in my header, I'm going to say B draw GUI, so I like to put a B in front so I know this is a Boolean variable. So now we're going to say, are we drawing the GUI or not? And here I'm going to say if B draw GUI, draw the GUI, and then all I need to do, because I'd set up previously my key press to be a switch statement, I can make another, in the case of a G for GUI, draw GUI is equivalent to not draw GUI. So if it's true, it becomes false. If it's false, it becomes true. And then, just as I set my registration, my initialization up here in the setup, I'm going to say draw GUI initially equals true. So using this drawing a GUI with a true, false Boolean variable is something I use quite a lot. That helps me debug and view a final piece of code that I'm working on if I'm trying to build an installation or another piece of artwork. I don't want to be killing what I'm doing and going back to the code and coming backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. And the ability to have tools that appear to allow me to tweak settings, consider things, and then hide them is really useful during the development. So if I run this now, compiles up. Here is my debug view, checking that I've got a depth image and an RGB image, and I've got my control panel, and if I press the G key, the GUI appears and disappears. So I can press the P key, get my point cloud up, have a look around, tweak the depth that I want from the far clip, very far away, or very near. When I've got that set up, I can press the G key and my GUI disappears. And there's one last trick that I think I'm going to add into this, which I use very commonly, which is I'd like to run this full screen. And there's a great simple command. We're going to go back to our switch statement here. I'll just add this in. Actually, we should break after drawing the GUI if we press the G key. And I'm going to say, case, if I press the F key, I want to use OF toggle full screen. And then I break. And this just does exactly that. Toggles from full screen to windowed, full screen to windowed. So it's a great way, really quickly, I can set up debug, see what things look like, run it at full screen, be able to stand back and appreciate what I'm doing without windows and menus and all the other debug stuff in the middle of development. So I can go through this sort of messy, artist, creative, iterative process, looking, considering, tweaking, looking, considering, tweaking, that you do whether you're drawing on paper, you're painting, you're sculpting, or in this case, crafting with code. So let's have a look and see what we've got. I've got my debug, I've got my GUI, I can make my point cloud, I can press G to show and hide my GUI, I've got my easy cam to move things around. So if I press F, I get a full screen view, and if I press G, it hides the GUI, and then it's time for me to say thank you very much, wave goodbye. Please subscribe to the channel, hit like, leave comments underneath, tell me about the kind of things that you're interested in seeing, and I will see you on another video. Thanks again.